I think we're at the point where the look and feel of the game is really starting to come together. Let's start by going straight into the first monster map. To get acquainted, let's look at the before and after of this map. You can see that I've added a lot of foliage here. I reused the bushes and I changed it to be a consistent dark green color instead, rather than using the lime green. There is a risk of the foliage blending in with the character, but I've set it up so that the character's skin tone will change along with their evolution. So it's initially this fluorescent green while it's a new player, and then eventually it'll be a more pale green and then change as it evolves. These trees were actually pretty painful for me to figure out how to draw, so I've just chosen to repurpose the same one. I think this is probably okay since it is background asset, and I am going to have a wood cutting skill actually coming very soon. So I want to differentiate between the regular background trees and the trees that you can actually chop down for logs. I do plan on making variations on it for different events like spring or winter, things like that. And then if you look higher up on this map, you can see that I've drawn a new portal to replace the regular looking one. This is going to tie into one of the slime's rare drops, the gumdrops, which will let you unlock this world. I anticipate it being a bonus world where you can get a lot of special ingredients that you can use to boost what you cook or make in the game. It'll be a world that's run by the slime monsters, and it will take a detour from the cookie theme. You can see little hints about that world on the cookies themselves. So you can see a river in the upper left, and then you have scattered gumdrop houses that you can imagine that the slimes live in. And maybe you've noticed, but there's a little bunny that occasionally runs back and forth behind the bushes. I put little roaming entities like this in the first few maps. I probably will continue doing that for later maps as well, because it does add a little bit more character and life to the game, and it could potentially add good tie-ins for future events or plot lines as well. So while we're here, let's check out part of the new revival flow. We'll just quickly enter combat with these slimes so that they can kill us. So yeah, finally, now the player has the ability to die. I've been wanting to add this to the player's life cycle since I think the first video I ever created on this channel. We have a kind of silly placeholder animation. The full death animation will probably include part of this animation, but it works for now. So you can see we have a little revival pop-up. When I was designing the revive pop-up, I wanted to make it a bit more interesting by adding some character to the monsters. Each monster will say different things if you die because of them. I'm hoping that they won't trigger the player too much. I think I'll keep it more on the playful side, because dying in a game can be one of those really frustrating experiences that makes people not want to play something. And as you can see under the revive button, whenever your player dies, it will get a debuff that will temporarily make it more vulnerable or something like that. I haven't thought about what the affliction will be yet, or if I even want to have a negative effect, because it may be enough of a consequence for the player to have to go back to town, run back to the map, and regenerate all of their hit points again. So I'll probably make the decision when I'm balancing the earlier levels. And also I'll probably give all new players a buff that makes them immune to any negative consequences from dying in the beginning. Clicking on this revive button actually works, but if you have revival items, it will allow you to revive in place without any penalty. I haven't created that item yet, but this is what the pop-up will look like. Before we check out town, as I mentioned in the last update, I wanted to add some multiplayer interactivity, so players will be able to revive each other once they have the skill. I don't have multiplayer functionality yet, but I did implement all of the pop-ups for it. So going back to the previous death pop-up, this is what it would look like if a player was reviving you, and this is what it will look like once you're revived. Initially, I thought about letting people write a custom revival message as well, but I know there can be a lot of issues with content moderation, so I don't want to build in too many places where people could ruin others' experiences without me having the content moderation defenses in place already. You can also, of course, revive players without giving them anything. Even just not receiving a negative debuff could be enough of a reward, honestly. And furthermore, since this will be a game with a mixture of idle and active play, I'm going to build a way for you to revive people even when they're offline. So whoever you revive will be able to continue making gains beyond the time that you revive them. Honestly, this is not the most necessary feature, but I think it will be interesting. When I played Toontown, they had a lot of features built in to encourage players to help each other. You'd have more experienced players who'd have quests to help new players out. And I think these kind of things help promote a better atmosphere and game experience. So that's all for revivals for now. Let's go to town and see what's changed. Last update, I built out a lot of this map, but I had more ideas of what I wanted to do. So for example, we have a little sailboat that sails back and forth, and also a little duck that you can interact with. As for sound, I played around with the idea of adding some nature sounds, but I have no idea what the music for the maps is going to be yet, and I'll probably make the music at the very end. So I decided against adding atmospheric sounds for things that you can't directly see on the map or interact with right now. So for example, if you go to the stove, you can see that we now have boiling sounds. And I think that makes sense because you can see the pot boiling here. We'll have different background sounds for each type of cooking, so you'll also be able to hear some frying sounds, and maybe there'll be others. And now if we go to the furnace, you can hear that we have a soft flame crackling sound that plays when the furnace is on. I'll definitely have fine-grained sound control so the player can toggle on or off different types of sounds like music, ambience, and user interface sounds. And as I'm looking at the map right now, I thought of some new ways that I can make this look more like a kitchen. Because this is a culinary game, I think it should have a stronger kitchen theme beyond just these checkered tiles. So I don't think this is the final iteration of this map, but pretty close, pretty close. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk a bit about the items. If you notice when we were turning on the stove and the furnace, the items have changed. I've gone back to the initial assets and redrew a lot of them so that they would fill the inventory slot. They seemed a bit too small before, so before we've gotten too far along in the process of creating these assets, I wanted to just correct that issue. As I was making the mining ores bigger, I decided to just redraw them at the same time. I just felt like they weren't good enough. They fulfilled the purpose, but I don't think they were anything special. And honestly, that's probably fine for the basic ores in the beginning, but I wanted them to look a bit prettier because your character will be gathering a lot of materials and training skills. So similar to how I looked at what real mines look like to draw the mining backgrounds, I did the same for copper rocks instead of just going off of what they usually look like in games. So going to the mines, we can see a lot has changed. First, let's talk about the mining points. When I was looking up copper ore, I realized that copper rocks are actually very beautiful, so I'm glad that I looked it up. I redrew both the mining points and the ores that drop. I think the scale of these mining points relative to the player makes a lot more sense. Now when I look at the old one, it looks like the player is mining pebbles or something in comparison. If we click on a mining point, you can see that it lights up to make it absolutely clear that you're mining and which point you're hitting. I revisited RuneScape several months ago and I really liked their mining indicator in the new 3D version of the game. Cool, so that's the copper rocks. Going down, if you remember before, we couldn't actually go down, but now we can. Now we can see the bronze mining points. I think the bronze looks really cool because it has a streak of red through it. So there we have the mining points. Let's touch on the snail in the room. This was actually the first roaming critter that I had the idea of making, but as I thought more about it and started animating it, I decided to make it a proper NPC. So now we have a new NPC that can give you gems when you click on it. Gems are the premium currency of the game. I won't spoil too much of his backstory, but I've already thought about how he ties into the plot and some of his animations reflect that. It's also around the size of a monster, so I could potentially make a map that's related to snails in the future. So just quickly looking at the background map improvements, we can see that the bear now has a shovel, and there was also a mining cart downstairs. I've also added some droplet sounds, and if you listen closely, there's some ambient flying sounds. You can imagine that the top of the cave has some bats that are lurking there. That's all for today. As for next time, now that we have a really good visual foundation for the game, I'll be working on the next monster map, and I'm going to introduce a new woodcutting skill. I'll also be making improvements to various animations, and I'll be learning about shaders in Godot, so I think there'll be some good upgrades that we can make to the game. Feel free to subscribe if you'd like to continue following along with the journey to create this culinary MMORPG. I will see you in 2 weeks with the next update. Thanks for taking the time to watch.